Perfect. So, hi everybody, and also from my side, I don't know, some of you might have recognized that I'm working quite a bit in the instrument exemplar, but also instrument work package, but also in the exemplar work package. So within the next minutes, I would like to link these two work packages by showing you how we implement our instruments in the Swiss Alps exemplar. So looking at our famous decision tree, the story of our exemplar starts at the bottom with a problem we have identified in our case study region, which is, as in many other European mountain regions as well, an increasing mismatch between a high demand for ecosystem services, including a traditional landscape on the one side, and the decreasing number of farms cultivating these lands on the other hand. So in our exemplar, all research evolves around these questions: which policy strategies can balance the supply of and demand for mountain ecosystem services in future? The basic idea of our approach to tackle this question is shown here. So in a first step, we have assessed which ecosystem services people, regional people, local residents would like to have in future and how they trade them against each other. As you can see, we have done so with a choice experiment. In a second step, we have modeled exactly the same ecosystem services on the various pathways of different policy interventions and have looked at how well this potential supply fits the demand in future. Let me show you some exemplary results of how this looks like. So on the x-axis, you see the time up to the planning horizon. The dotted lines, I don't know if you can see them on the presentation, indicate the years in which interventions have been implemented in the modeling. On the y-axis, you see the change in utility people experience over time following these different policy pathways. The utility is a weighted and aggregated measure that amalgamates changes in different ecosystem services according to the preferences the people experience in the choice experiment. So it is like an indicator of how well the overall package of ecosystem services is satisfied. The black line is a baseline scenario with like ongoing development from the demographic perspective, but with no additional interventions. And the other four colors are different policy interventions. So I won't go too much into details here, but point at two important things. The first one, as I was talking yesterday with Mark, is not so interesting. So we see that we have basically a utility loss as compared to the present situation under all these pathways. So with a single intervention, we somehow cannot satisfy this demand in future. But the second point, it's much more interesting, and we see that like the effectiveness of the different interventions in mitigating the loss of utility compared to this baseline depends on the type and also the timing of the intervention. So, for example, looking at this picture, we can see that implementing a more targeted direct payment scheme at any time over this planning time will improve or diminish the loss of utility more than a restrictive spatial planning. And then looking at spatial planning only, we can see that an early implementation is much better, or let's say better, in diminishing this loss at the utility than a late implementation. We have also modeled different combination and different sequencing of these interventions and could look how well these different pathways or how close they come to this ecosystem services demand at the planning horizon. In our exemplar, a combination between structural interventions, restrictive spatial planning, and some agricultural policy measures seems to be most beneficial. However, there's a flexibility in the pathways and the timing of these interventions, which lead to a similar output at the planning horizon. So, in the next step, we will discuss these results with regional planners and decision makers. And we will do so by taking a bunch of interesting development pathways and integrating them in a collaborative user platform. For each of these pathways, we can provide various information, obviously like the timing and the type of the policy interventions, but also how ecosystem service trade-offs of single ecosystem services evolve over time, and also how some socioeconomic indicators, for example, farmers' income, evolve over time. The platform, which is currently set up by famous Tom Klein, which sits there, looks like that. On the right hand, the users will have the possibility to choose different interventions, and then the platform will inform on how these interventions change the landscape in terms of quantitative indicators, but also in terms of different visualization types. So coming back to the decision tree, we finally end up at this policy level. And we hope to find useful strategies, but also societally accepted policy strategies that can balance this supply and demand for ecosystem services in the long term in our region. Thank you.